back to Fireside Read Aloud. I've got two very special reading buddies. Do you guys want to say hi?
Hi.
We hope you guys are doing well and snuggle up with a stuffy or a sibling for your reading buddy and relax and enjoy. We are on chapter 6 and this is titled, Where's Benny? Ooh. Let's see what happens. All right, chapter 6. We can't go on pretending nothing's wrong, Violet said later that evening. They had just finished dinner and all 4 Aldens were sitting in a tiny garden behind the house. And Myra is bound to notice the men in sunglasses herself. I'm surprised she hasn't already, Henry said. They've been trailing us for 2 days. Trailing us or trailing Myra? Jessie turned to face him. They were sitting on wrought iron chairs around a small umbrella table. Good point, Henry answered. We've always been with her, so there's no way to tell. Today was a close call, Violet said. She shivered a little, even though it was a warm evening. Got Jets interrupted. The scene with Benny at the Washington Monument had really shaken her up. The man in sunglasses had been just inches away from Benny. What if he had reached out and grabbed him? The Aldens had stayed calm, finished the tour of the monument, and then moved on to another museum on the mall. And Myra had never suspected a thing. Suddenly, Peter Marshall called to them from the kitchen. He was holding the screen door open with his elbow and balancing a huge bowl of popcorn. We're playing cards in the dining room. Want to join us? Sounds great. Benny bounded to his feet and dashed across the grass. A few minutes later, everyone was settled around the dining room table, playing gin rummy. Violet stopped in the kitchen to get a glass of lemonade, and Mrs. Parsons drew her aside. Would you mind bringing out some drinks for the others? I'm just too upset to think straight tonight. Mrs. Parsons looked very worried and was rubbing her hands anxiously on her apron. I'll be glad too, but what's wrong? Asked Violet. Mrs. Parsons sat down slowly at the kitchen table, and Violet pulled up a chair next to her. There's been another disappearance, Mrs. Parsons said in a low voice, and this time it isn't money or stamps, it's traveler's checks. The Bartletts, the young couple in room 6, just came down to tell me. Room 6? Violet nearly gasped. John Sutterth had been snooping there that morning. Mrs. Parsons nodded. It's such a shame. They say they left them on the dresser, and now they're gone. What could have happened to them? She glanced toward the dining room. You want him to get down? What? You want him to get down? No? Okay. Surely no one in this house would have taken them. Violet hesitated. Should she mention that John Sutterth had been in room 6? Was he a thief? Or could he possibly have had a good reason for being there? Before she could decide what to do, Peter Marshall called for something to drink, and Violet quickly began making lemonade. For the next half hour, everyone played cards, and Violet waited for an opportunity to speak to her sister and brothers about John Sutter. She was all set to duck into the kitchen with them when Claire Bartlett burst into the dining room. It's okay, Mrs. Parsons. She found all smiles. Look what I found. She was waving a wad of traveler's checks in a navy blue holder. Where were they? Mrs. Parsons looked relieved. Somehow they had slipped down between the drawer and the dresser. She smiled at her husband, who came up behind her. You have no idea how much better I feel. Me too, Mrs. Parsons muttered. Violet sank back a little in her seat. At least one mystery was solved. Later that evening, Jessie was helping Mrs. Parsons lock up when she heard a faint meow at the front door. Do you have a cat? Jessie called to Mrs. Parsons. Oh, that's Farah, Mrs. Parsons answered. Would you let her in for me? She must have sneaked out when I was bringing in the lawn chairs. Jessie opened the front door, and a graceful Siamese cat darted past her legs into the kitchen. She was about to close the door when she heard a car engine idling somewhere on the darkened street. Suddenly, the noise became louder, and Jessie realized that the driver was cruising past the row of brick houses. in the pitch dark. That means he doesn't have his lights on. Yikes. Why would anyone drive with no lights? She pretended to close the door, but kept it cracked open a couple of inches. She watched as a long black limousine paused in front of the parsons and then crept slowly down the street. It was impossible to see who was inside because of the darkness, but Jessie had a strong hunch. It had to be the men in sunglasses. The next day, the Aldens and Amira were ready to leave the house when Mrs. Parsons stopped them. "Could you do me a big favor?" she asked. "I could really use a roll of stamps." She handed Henry $30. "I was sure I had some of the astronaut stamps left, but I can't find them anywhere." "We'll be glad to get some," Henry told her. He turned and bumped into John Sutter, who was standing in the hall. "Sorry, sir," he said politely. "That's okay." The artist's voice was gruff. A batch of letters tumbled out of his jacket. As Henry bent down to help retrieve them, something colorful caught his eye. The envelopes had astronaut stamps on them, just like the ones Mrs. Parsons liked. Was it just a coincidence, he wondered? Why would Mr. Sutter steal a roll of stamps? Half an hour later, the Aldens and Amira were strolling down Embassy Row, admiring the colorful flags. "Oh, look," Amira pointed out. "There's the French flag. It's red, white, and blue, just like ours," Benny pointed out. "And there's Italy, England, and Switzerland," Amira added. "I recognize the Swiss flag," Jessie said. "It's the one with the white cross and on the red background. But what's the green one?" She pointed to an unusual flag with a red stripe and a black stripe and an eagle in the middle. "Oh, that's Egypt," Amira, as usual, was right. When they reached the building, a small plaque said Egyptian Embassy. "You really know a lot about foreign countries," Violet said admiringly. And Myra looked embarrassed. "I'm interested in geography." She quickly lowered her eyes to see her guidebook. "And I see someone who's interested in us," Benny blurted out. He pointed to a long black limousine that swung around the corner and crawled along the boulevard, keeping pace with them. They quickly crossed the street heading to the Smithsonian, and Henry came to a decision. "Admira," he said gently, "a limousine has been following us for days. You don't know anything about it, do you?" Amira looked startled by his question. How would I know anything about it?" she said softly. Two faint spots of color appeared on her cheeks. "There must be hundreds of long black limousines in the city." "But we keep seeing the same one," Henry said grimly. "The people inside must be after something." "Maybe they're after us," Benny whispered. He moved a little closer to Violet. "Are you sure you don't know anything? I can't see anything about it?" Henry asked Amira again. "Yes," Amira said quickly. "Where shall we go today?" Violet said to change the subject. "First, let's stop here at the Museum of American History," Jessie suggested. "Where shall we go first?" Amira asked, once they were inside the museum. "The First Lady's dresses," Violet said promptly. A few minutes later, Violet skipped down a red carpet, exclaiming, "I feel like I'm in the White House." The entrance to the dress exhibit was designed to look like a White House reception room, with crossed flags, crystal chandeliers, and gilt mirrors. They passed under a huge presidential seal and found themselves in a dimly lit maze of rooms filled with mannequins wearing the First Lady's dresses. "Look," Jessie said in an awestruck tone, "there's Mrs. Lincoln's dress. It's beautiful." "Why is it so dark in here?" Benny said. "Light damages the dresses," Jessie explained. "Some of the fabrics are very old." Benny moved restlessly ahead of the others. He was starting to get hungry. Violet was reading a plaque about preserving the dresses when she froze. Standing right behind Benny was one of the men in, what do you think?
Sunglasses.
Sunglasses, yeah. Apparently he didn't realize that she could see him reflected in the darkened glass. "Benny," she started to say, but the words caught in her throat when she realized it was too late. Benny had just scampered past a potted fern and disappeared down another dark corridor. The man in the sunglasses seemed to be following him, and Violet put her hand to her mouth. Should she go after them, or should she alert the others? There was no time to think. Just then, Admira edged up to her to look at a dress. "Listen," Violet said, grabbing her friend's arm. "Go get the others. The men in sunglasses are back, and they're after Benny." "What?" Admira looked shaken. "Just get them," Violet hissed. Before Admira could even reply, Violet took off at a dead run. She had to get Benny in time. That is the end of our chapter, boys and girls. Do you want to go turn off the recording? I will see you all next time. Have a great day. Love you. Bye.